It is good to have the class this morning once again. I know that you didn't know I was teaching, but I'm going to be teaching lessons from the book of Nehemiah, or growing with Nehemiah. As you've noticed here lately, I've been studying more and preaching more from the Old Testament. We're hopefully very soon going to begin a study of Isaiah here in the adult class on Wednesday evening. So I've been trying to brush up on some of the Old Testament history. And I've been preaching. Last week we talked about Joshua and the Gibeonites and other ones, the wall of Jericho. This is where we're going to go to the book of Nehemiah. So we're turning over to Nehemiah, and we're going to look at some lessons about growing and how to accomplish things from the book of Nehemiah. So we're going to be looking at, and I think I've got 10 or 12 principles down here. I think there's 10 actually. We pick up Nehemiah as a book that dates around 450, 430 BC in that area. We notice that Nehemiah served under the king Artaxerxes at that time. Historically, Israel had been in captivity for 70 years. They will be permitted to return around 536 BC. Ezra, as we studied in Wednesday night, he is primarily responsible for the rebuilding of the temple. We're studying Zechariah as well in the Wednesday night class. Zechariah is returned with building the people up spiritually. It's more or less an encouragement about turn back to God and receive blessings. And that's where I want to pick up the idea about Nehemiah. Let's Nehemiah chapter 4 and verse 6, if you want to use the actual text of it, is probably the one that most people remember. So he built the wall, and the entire was joined together up to half its height, for the people had a mind to work. That's the first thing I want to point out, is that the people had a mind to work. In doing that, Kyle, I'm going to pick on you.
Sure.
Do you care if a blue jay builds a nest in a sweet gum tree in Kisatchie National Forest 4 miles east of Kisatchie? No. Micah? Kyle is an engineer, supposedly working with electrical situations. That's about all I know about his job. Do you care if there's a transformer on an aluminum pole 75 feet in the ground that has a fault in it that Kyle Jones designed that's going to cause the whole eastern seaboard, eastern coast of America to be out of electricity for a week? You do care. What's the difference?
It affects me.
How does it affect? How does living on the eastern seaboard affect you? You live from the east, never mind. Kyle, how does it affect you?
Well, it might take my license and my livelihood, me in particular.
Okay. Reason
I know what you're getting at.
I asked that is the idea of caring. The first thing we need to do to grow spiritually or to grow as a congregation is we need to care. Caring. Folks, I don't know if a blue jay's going to build a nest 4 miles east of Kisatchie in an oak tree or pine, whatever I said 5 minutes ago. I could care less where blue jay lives out there. And I would be more concerned about the electrical situation because Kyle's the engineer that designed it, and it's going to put people out of electricity. But really and truly, I don't care about either one of them. It's not going to affect my day-to-day operation. The first lesson I want to look at Nehemiah. Let's go to Nehemiah chapter 1. And I want to pick up and down. Hananiah, one of my brethren, came man from Judah and asked him concerning the Jews who had escaped, who had survived the captivity and concerning Judah. And they said to me, the survivors who are left in the captivity of the province are there in great distress and reproach. Here we find that it begins with his brethren coming to Nehemiah and advising them of a situation that's bad. He says to them, our brethren are in distress. When we hear people today say that the church is in distress, or the congregation is not doing well, or the congregation, God's people is not prospering like they should, the first thing I want you to see is that Nehemiah, it's brought his attention that there is a need, and Nehemiah cares about that need. Folks, the solution to any problem, this is point number one, the solution to any problem is caring about it. And I use two extreme situations. What about caring one for another, loving one another? What about caring for the church? Caring is where change begins to take place. If you care about this community, you're going to do everything you can that it might prosper. Folks, if you care about this congregation, you're going to do everything you can to make it prosper. You understand that particular thought? When people don't care, it begins to fall apart. Let's go, if you would, to the book of Proverbs. Proverbs, the 24th chapter. At verse 30. He says, I went by the field and found a lazy man, and by the vineyard of a man devoid of understanding. And there it was, all overgrown with thorns. Its surface was covered with nettles. Its stones were broken down. When I saw it, I considered it well. I looked on it and received instructions. I want you to think about, if Linda, you haven't been to my house in a while.
I've never been. Well, y'all have been to your house.
It's neglected right now because Brenda hadn't mowed the grass.
Really?
Brenda hadn't raked the leaves. She hadn't trimmed the bushes at all this year. Michael, you know what that makes my yard look like? Like a lazy man lives there. You think about the spiritual weeds in our life. We let laziness, we let apathy, we let complacency, we let neglect. They seem to flourish so easily. Linda?
But, really, I think we're so involved with our own lives, our own little problems, what we care about.
Mm-hmm.
I am. I don't think we take time to think, hey, the guy that sits on the back seat back there, I've been saying, I've got to get his number, I've got to call him, I've got to talk to him. I haven't done it yet.
Right,
Do I care? Not enough.
You care, but not enough. You care, but not enough. And I believe if we look at the study of Nehemiah, that's the first thing we see Nehemiah say. They brought him this news. He says he came, and they said to me in verse 3, and I'm back in Nehemiah chapter 1 now, the survivors who are left from the captivity of the province are there in great distress and reproach. The wall of Jerusalem is also broken down, and its gates are burned with fire. Now, what was the response of Nehemiah? Does anybody know? What did Nehemiah do? Oh, well, I don't care. Somebody will get around to it. About 20 years ago, somebody has to build that wall. What did Nehemiah do?
He sat down and wept.
He sat down and he wept. He was concerned. He cared, and he cared enough that it prompted him to an action. And I think that's where, if something's wrong, we need to care about it. And going back to kind of what Linda said, is the idea that perhaps we don't care enough, or perhaps we are too involved with our own caring things. If we're going to grow, we need to care. If there's disunity, we need to fix it. If there's lack of teaching, we need to fix it. If there's lack of study, we need to fix it. And I think that's what Nehemiah is fixing to do. Nehemiah is going to start this book. He's going to fix it. He's going to fix it. And it's going to take him a while. But by chapter 4, the wall was finished because people had a mind to work. He had stirred the people up, Linda.
Well, I think we've got preachers, they're supposed to fix it. If there's anything in the congregation that needs fixing,
All right, let me respond to what's the job of the ministry?
to preach the gospel.
Does that mean I got to go fix Pat's problem with her washing machine?
Oh, absolutely.
It means I got to come to Evans and fix your problem. You're around lazy boy because you couldn't get up out of it?
No, I can't do that.
That's not the job of the preacher.
It's not.
Now let me go. I hadn't gone down that road, but let me go down it. Whose job in the congregation, as authorized by God, as organized by God, is caring for the needs of those in physical needs? Nope.
Yeah.
What? Nope. Nope.
Well, deacons,
Come on, deacons
were assigned to, yeah.
The deacons were assigned the job of caring for the Grecian women. So y'all got me off my outline. The preacher does the preaching, the elders does the leading, and the deacons do the administration of daily operations. If Pat's washing machine needs to be fixed and she's desperate, we're going to send one of the deacons over there.
Yeah,
Now, this is not a class on the ordination church. But do you see what I'm saying there? Should the preacher care? Absolutely. Should the elders care when the congregation has a problem, when Linda has a problem, or Burnell has a problem, or Micah has a problem? Yeah, absolutely, they should care because they're charged. The deacons, they should be there. In the book of Acts, it says they appointed deacons that they might not be pushed to serving the tables. I'm paraphrasing that. But everybody should care. Let's get back to the lesson of caring.
Yeah, I was going to say, because we went through the book of Nehemiah in one of our classes, and one thing I thought that he brought out was real good was, why the people had a mind to work. If you'll notice, as you go through the book of Nehemiah, the pronouns that he uses, It's always we and us. It's never y'all need to or they need to fix this. He always made it personal, and he encouraged everyone to work with him because he worked with them. He himself, all of his servants, everyone who was with him, went and they did the work together. He said, we did this.
That's
and everyone bought into it, and he set the example but was in it with them. And I think that's what helped make that atmosphere where everyone had a mind to work.
Okay. Let me ask this question. I like what I hadn't thought about that, but the pronoun, let me write that on the notes. I can put this in. The pronoun we. That'd make a good lesson, we.
We, that's right.
Who preaches here? Who does the job of the preacher?
You
Who?
You do.
I'm the mouth. I'm the front man. Who does the job of preaching? We do. We do. Every one of us does the job of preaching in the fact that we contribute to the support of the pulpit. We contribute to encouragement. You pray for the preacher. You encourage the preacher. You ask questions. You take part. You know, we do. You know, let me get back on my outline. Let's go to Nehemiah chapter 1 and verse 11. Not only did Nehemiah weep, not only did Nehemiah care, but the third, and I said, I've numbered it number 3. He said in verse 8, remember, I pray. In the context, he says, I pray, in verse 5, and I said, I pray, Lord of God, great and awesome God, you who kept your covenant mercy. Nehemiah took his petition to God in prayer. Pray without ceasing. So many times we neglect that. Prayer is so greatly emphasized both in the Old Testament and the New Testament. Prayer is our communication with God. Great men of faith has always prayed. Abraham prayed, Isaac prayed, Moses prayed, David prayed, Nehemiah prayed, Paul prayed. Here's the question for us. When we care about a situation and we get ready to do a deed, and I'm going to use our gospel meeting. We have a gospel meeting coming up in a month, 2 months, on July the 14th. Now, we care about the souls of this community. Have we started praying about, we haven't started making plans. I don't have all the outlines DJ's preaching, and I haven't got all the legwork done for it, and I don't have the ads cut for it, and I don't have the announcements done for it. But the first thing we need to do is we make the plans. We care enough to plan the meeting. Are we praying about it? Hey, now that's a very, have you prayed for our meeting? I know we had one prayer last week. But beginning to pray because of it. Jesus taught many parables about praying. Let's go to Luke chapter 10. Luke chapter 10, and we'll pick up in about verse 1 of Luke chapter 10. Let me get back. Luke chapter 11. I'm sorry, not 10. Luke chapter 11. Now it came to pass as he was praying in a certain place, he ceased, and one of his disciples said, Lord, teach us to pray. And he said, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy will be done. Give us a day. We know the Lord's Prayer. How many of us today needs to learn to pray? What is prayer? Is it some great oracle, some great speech that we get up and we give before God that we might impress God with our vocabulary and we might impress God with our verbiage and we might sound good to those who hear us praying? Is that what prayer is? That's a show. That's a pretense. Prayer is my desire made to God that he might help me or he might supply my needs. It's also a prayer of thanksgiving. Don't forget that. Edgar?
I think it says somewhere in the Bible that we don't know how to pray to God, but Christ is our mediator.
He is our mediator. He is our go-between. And in Romans chapter 8 says the Holy Spirit maketh intercessions with us, which we cannot understand. But we need to utilize the avenue of prayer. If we care, we need to ask God to cast your cares upon him because he cares for us. James chapter 5, and I believe verse 16 tells us, the prayer of a righteous man availeth what? Much. Folks, that stirs of comfort. When I think about Nehemiah's growth pattern. He cared. He wept. He was concerned. But then he prayed. After he prayed, I want to try to get to, what did he do? And Nehemiah chapter 2 is where we're at. Nehemiah, he goes to the king to get permission. He needs to get some direction. He begins to make plans. He begins to plan out the course of action. You know, he went to the king in the context of chapter 2. He says, King, what can I do? You know, can I have permission? The king gave him permission to go. He sent him to the forest. He went to the governors. But notice, he went, verse 11, and he began to look things over. He came to Jerusalem. He began to make plans. He arrived at Jerusalem for 3 days. He assessed the damage to the walls. And then in verses 16 and 18, notice what he did. And the officials did not know where I had gone or what I had done. I had not yet told the Jews, the priests, the nobles, the officials, the others who did the work. Then I said to them, you see the distress that you're in, how Jerusalem lies waste, and its gates are broken fire. Come, let us build the wall of Jerusalem, that we may no longer be a reproach. He made plans by going to the king. Then he went and looked around Jerusalem. Then he went to those in charge and says, you fellas we need to get busy. And I'm going to stress the word we. He says, we need to get busy. You see, you're in distress. You see the distress that you're in and all that you... And notice the latter part of verse 17, and I've not thought about the word we. That's a very good point, God. That we may no longer live in reproach. His plans included the leadership. His plans included the direction that they needed to go. Folks, today, whether the congregation has eldership or does not have an eldership, if there's something that needs to be done, we need to include everybody. We don't need to leave anybody out because everybody's needed. Do we understand that? Do we understand that point? We need to make plans. We need to have some direction. We find an example of people today that does that. Good intentions left undone become what? You've heard, and what as an Anglicanism? Good intentions left undone becomes bad deeds indeed. Good intentions left undone becomes bad deeds indeed. You've heard that several times. We need to examine where we're at, and let's go to Hebrews, the 5th chapter, and let's see if I can make this point. Hebrews chapter 5, and the context of verse 12. By this time you ought to have been teachers. You have need that someone teach you again, which be the first principles of the oracles of God. You've come to need milk and not solid food. We need to understand the importance of growth. Now,
as long as we own milk, we can't digest that meat. In other words, as Paul was talking about that.
That's true. We have to have growth.
Still on milk.
We have an opportunity tonight, and here again, it's just us home folks. Colt Martin, a young man, is going to be preaching tonight. I know what he's talking about, he's preaching on. I feel comfortable. Would we put Colt Martin, a young man, and he's somewhat skilled in the work, would we put him in a situation to handle a major problem in the congregation, go to the pulpit with it? Would we assign him some topic like unity and diversity or something I can expect him to know what he was doing about Kyle? He's going to be very basic. It's going to be a very basic lesson. I mean, I know what he's preaching on. That's it. I'll let him tell you. But you need to use the level of maturity. When he went to build this wall, he had carpenters and masons and stonemasons, and he had gate hangers, and he had priests, and he had different people. You need to know the ability of those you put in there. Now, Andy's not a song leader. Andy would sing if he has to, Micah. Micah's a better song leader. You going to put Andy up to lead singing for the gospel meeting? I hope not. Some of you other people better show up for that. I don't have that ability that I need. I think you need to do that. What the point I'm making is when Nehemiah began to organize all of these things, he began to make plans, and that plans included understanding what he was doing. Now let's go to verse 18. I'm in Nehemiah chapter 2 and verse 18. And I told them of the hand of my God which had been good upon me, and also the king's words that he had spoken to me. So they said, let us rise up and build. Then they set their hands to the good work. All the planning in the world, folks, without execution is useless. You can plan. You can plan. But till you set it in motion, what good's your plans? Let's go back to our meeting. I'll see where we're going with this. We've got a meeting planned. We're praying for it. We got a man of ability coming to do the preaching. I feel comfortable in that. But are we going to let us get to work now? Don't wait till Thursday night that our meeting closes on Friday to invite your neighbor. Don't make plans. Don't make Tuesday afternoon the plan to do something on Thursday night that interferes with the meeting. You've chosen the work, you've prayed about it, you've set the plan in place. It's time to go to work. Nehemiah chapter 2 and verse 18 very clearly says, let us, what's he saying? Then they set their hands to the good work. They got busy. We have a problem in the fact that many times we have good intentions, but we know, Mark 16:16, go into all the world and preach the gospel. Is that a good work? Absolutely. Well, us 12 apostles, we've been tired this week, and we fished a long time this week, Kyle, and we'll go preach the gospel 5 years from now. Give us 5 years to refer it to committee, and give us a couple of years to select the preachers, and give me a couple of years to select the topic, and then we'll get around to it. No. That's not the Great Commission. Go ye into all the world, the urgency of it. How this wall had been laid in disrepair for a long time. Nehemiah needed the work. They had become a reproach to the nations around them. They were in distress. Nehemiah said, let us put our hands to it and let us go to work. James chapter 1 and verse 22, be ye thinkers on the word and not hearers only.
Doers.
Do it. What? Kyle, what do you mean do it? Read Micah, read James 1:20. James 1, and I believe it's 22. Let me look to make sure I'm right. James 1 and verse 22. And that's it. Be ye thinkers on the word and meditators only. Somebody read James 1:22 or quote it for me.
But be doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves.
Be ye doers of the word. Folks, go into all the world and preach the gospel. That's an activity. Come ye up among the world and be ye separate, saith the Lord. That's an activity. You know, we be understanding what he said. The plan needs to be workable, but it needs to be doing it. Proverbs 21 and verse 5, the plans of the diligent lead to sure plenty, but those of everyone who is faithful shall end in poverty. Okay, so now we got the plan. We've saw the need, we've cared about it, we've prayed about it, we've got the plan, we've got the workers. The work is started. Right? What's the next thing that happens in the book of Nehemiah? Let's use chapter 4. Nehemiah chapter 4 and verse 1, and I'm kind of skipping ahead. When it happened, when Sanballat heard that we were building the wall, that he was furious and very indignation and mocked the Jews. Folks, there's a critic for everything. Oh, Linda, and I won't pick on Linda because I love her dearly. She's my biggest critic. Andy, you went 36 and a half minutes this morning. I told you not to preach for 35. 30. Andy, I like that suit, but it sure is baggy on you. And I'm picking on Linda, okay? I understand me there. But the point being, there's always a critic. There's always that says, and I've heard this probably every time I planned a meeting in the last 15 years of my life, oh, gospel meetings don't work. They've lost their effectiveness. Nobody comes but just the church. Here is a lesson from Nehemiah. Nehemiah had, it was about, there were several of them there. Goshen and Toban and other foreigners. They began mocking them, making fun of them. You look at them Church of Christ Christians up there. They're going to go to church every night this week. They must be a whole bunch of sinners up there, Pat. The point I'm making is overlook the critics. Andy, you can't preach. You don't have a college degree in theology. You don't know enough to stand in the pulpit. You're not qualified. Now, some of us may beat ourselves up that way. But there's critics there. Folks, let me tell you something. And y'all know this. I pray there's nothing doctrinal wrong with any lesson I preach. If it is, y'all better catch it and prove it wrong. But there's very few times I stand in an audience and I don't make a grammatical error, or the chart's got a spelling error, or my tie might get crooked, or I might cough during the sermon. If you want to criticize the preacher, you can find something. You may not like the way he combs his hair. I don't really care. But the point I'm making, Nehemiah had critics. And as he had critics, he had those that tried to get in his way. Folks, we got critics today to any gospel to growth. A man leading a family. It's more important that my kid play t-ball than go to Bible class on Sunday morning. Oh, he needs to have social skills to be a team player. What about the social skills of being in a Bible class? Oh, my kids, they can't memorize the book of Mark because they got to learn their math facts. Folks, I'm not down on math facts, and I'm not down on t-ball, and don't get me to that point. But there's always negative Nellies, that's what I call them, that will pull you down and set you back. Lord, Andy, we're just too tired, or we're just too weak, or we just don't feel good, or there's always negative, and we look at that, and I think that's a lesson we can learn. If we set out to accomplish something, good or bad, there's going to be those that criticize them. Sometimes their motives are sinister. Sometimes their motives are real. Perhaps sometimes it's needed. We shouldn't just simply accept it, but many times we need to understand it. Thoughts, comments, or questions? I'm doing all. Come on, anybody help me out? Now, let's get to that. And I'm going to put this in. I'm going to change this point of the lesson. Let's go to Nehemiah chapter 3. Nehemiah chapter 3 talks about teamwork, and I guess that's where the word we comes in. They assign each group, and I'll not read all those names, but then those who built the wall of Jericho. There was each person there. They all got to work. Some of them was the high priest, Elishab, he was in verse 1. The high priest, they built the sheep gates in verses 18 through 19. Teamwork. Folks, every good plan has teamwork. Edgar, it's been a few years since you played ball. I know it has. Were you the only person on the Evans Eagles in 1973 that shot the ball? Who shot the ball?
The whole team.
The whole team. Edgar, did you ever miss a basket? Did you ever miss a foul shot? Why did you miss a foul shot? You're standing on the line. There's nobody guarding you. There's nobody putting pressure on you. It's just you and the net. You got to throw the basketball up there, and it's got to go through. Why did you miss that foul shot, Edgar? Well, there's no obstacles in its way. There's nobody putting pressure on you to hit that foul shot, is there? Those critics may criticize, but it takes every team doing everything. Now, I'm using the Evans Eagles because Edgar was a part of them. Willis Ferris was the coach. How important was the bus driver to the success of that team?
That was to the game.
If you didn't have it, would you have been able to play? No, you couldn't have got there. How important is it to the church, to those that mow the grass? Anybody mow grass. But it keeps the church from being an issue. Like, the wall was in bad shape, and they let us not be of reproach. Let us get it cleaned up. How important is it those that send out gospel meeting announcements? We usually send out about 75 to 100 every May to the congregation is about 75. How important is it that I get Brenda Jean back there? Brenda, here's a stack of envelopes. They're pre-addressed. Here's a stack of meeting announcements. Would you fold and put them in the envelope and take them to the post office? Oh, that's a little thing. Without those going out, folks might not know about it. Teamwork. It's not just the preacher. It's not just the elders. It's everybody. Miss Carol, she lives, you're 40 miles from here, right? 40, 35? Somewhere about, okay, somewhere. She lives on the other side east of Leesville. It's just important that she takes part in that group because she's going to grow and she's going to edify Pat, and Pat's going to edify Jessica, and Jessica's going to edify Brenda Allison, and it's all going, everybody is needed, the point we're making. When we look at this wall being built, it was there. So many times we need it. Now, other things I want to point out in the idea of this, let me skip through it. We ignore we do the teamwork. I need to do the work, even though others won't. Let's go to Nehemiah chapter 3 and verse 5. Now here again, if I'm picking apart Nehemiah, forgive me. Nehemiah chapter 3 and verse 5. Now they came to Tenites, made repairs, but their nobles did not put their shoulder to the work of the Lord. I need to work even if everybody else isn't doing it. Even if Kyle Jones is not doing his work and not his job, that's not going to excuse me and my responsibility before God. Every one of us is accountable to God for the talents that he gives us. We may not all be 5-talent men. Some of us may be like Andy, 1 talent. But the point being, put your talent to use even if somebody else don't. Now, there again, let's go back to the ball team. If you've got 5 basketball players on the goal, and we know that old Edgar back there, he's not feeling well, he's been sick for 3 days, but he's got to play because he's the only one, he's my starter, and I don't have anybody to take his place. We're going to put him on the team. We're going to put him on the court, but we're going to tell you other 4 guys, y'all don't throw that ball to Edgar unless you have to, because his eyes ain't working good. He's had the flu this week, and we're going to make excuses for it, but we're going to pull his load for us. You see what I'm saying? That point's not working. Well, I see why you're looking at me like I'm crazy. If we're in the work of the church, if the preacher's been feeling bad, and he's had some personal problems in his life, and maybe he's had a death in the family, maybe his wife's been on him, whatever the case may be, we know he's having problems. Micah might need to pick up the say, Andy, I'll go visit Burnell this week. Or Randy and Jessica, y'all go visit Brendan and somebody else in Turkey. Teamwork is dream work. And when somebody in the dream is down, we're going to pick up the slack, but not make excuses for them. You understand that point? I need to work even if others can't or don't. So the reality of Nehemiah chapter 3 and verse 5 is that some were willing to pull their weight, but the others would not. Folks, if we waited for the slackers, we'd be a failure. If we waited for the slackers to catch up, we would be a failure. Sometimes we just simply got to press on. We've got to continue working. Let's go to 2 Corinthians, the 5th chapter. Let me get back to my text and get back to my outlines because I'm going to get in trouble. 2 Corinthians, the 5th chapter. We're all going to give an account for our actions. We must appear before the judgment seat of God. 2 Corinthians 5 and verse 10, we must all appear before the judgment seat of God. Cookie, you don't have to account for Linda's actions, thank goodness. Linda, you ain't got to account for Cookie's actions. They're sisters. I said that Cookie hadn't got to account for your actions, and you ain't got to account for Cookie's actions.
Yeah, well.
Okay, well, don't go there. What the point I'm making is we've got to stand on our own 2 feet. We've got to know our ability. We've got to know the task. We've got to know the need, and we've got to accept the responsibility of our own actions, whether it's successful actions or failure actions. We've got to accept our own actions. We notice sometimes we don't need to do that. You know, leaders lead by example, but the teachers have to follow. There's preachers, there's elders, there's deacons. You know, when others fail to work, it becomes discouraging. You know, I've been in congregations, and I'm sure you'll agree with it, that the preacher gets discouraged because nobody's behind or nobody's working with him. Elders get discouraged because the congregation, they're not doing anything wrong, but they're just not doing anything right either. You know, discouragement comes from those that don't carry their weight. Any thoughts or comments? Something else, next point, and I lost what count I was on. Don't go looking for trouble. The what ifs. Kyle, what if DJ gets sick the week of July the 14th? Micah, what if electricity goes off on July the 15th at 7 o'clock? We're going to Pat's house. You got a generator.
Don't worry about tomorrow. Today's sufficient enough.
For its own problems. You took the words right out of my mouth.
We can worry ourselves to death about what if.
The what ifs. What if? What if a tornado comes? Or what if, folks, the what ifs has done more to damage good laid plans. You know, what if the top of your light pole fails because of lightning stroke? You know, what if? I'm not going to worry about the what if. I'm going to build the best light pole I can. And for those of you that maybe watch a video, Kyle Jones is an engineer that builds light poles or structures or whatever. Linda?
You know, there's always things that happen. I know one time Benny was holding a meeting in Houston, and the electricity went out, and he had his charts, you know, everything. But it turned out bad.
If the computer goes out today, just keep preaching.
God always provides.
God always provides. God always provides. Very good point, Pat.
Deal with stuff when it happens.
You know, the what ifs. What if? Well, let me ask you this question. What if God comes back between now and then? Are you ready? What if? You need to plan for the what if, but the what if shouldn't keep you from doing your job. Maybe that's the way.
That's right.
Don't go.
Don't hold you back.
Don't go looking for trouble. Don't go looking for, you know, if things happen, well, they happen.
And Andy, and I'll tell you something else. If something happened, like, okay, DJ couldn't come, whatever, and yet we were having that meeting, every one of these men would take one night, and I guarantee you, we would have a successful meeting.
Absolutely. I mean,
I sit there and say, but yeah, let's do it.
if something was to happen at the last minute, Andy, you got to preach tonight. Oh, okay. This morning, well, yesterday afternoon, Ricky commented, Andy, if I can't be there in the morning, can you cover the class? Ricky did not know what I'd done this week. He didn't know my schedule. He didn't know I was buried up knee deep monkeys from orders. But I mean, what if I can't be there? Will you be ready? He planned on being. Yeah, he did. He tried to be. This morning I talked to Ricky 7 o'clock somewhere there. You know, to make Andy, I can't be there. Okay, we'll take care of it. It's coming. Did I have all this planned out 3 days ago or 4 days ago? No, I didn't. I put it together very quickly. But Nehemiah says, deal with internal problems. Be willing to work hard. Don't let the negative Nellies, don't let the critics overcome the laid out plans that you've got. Now, I want to go to something else, and I'm out of time. But in Nehemiah chapter 6, and I'll have to make it, stay focused. Keep your eye on the goal. Keep your eye on the goal. Stay focused on the plan. Nehemiah chapter 6, verses 1 through 14 talks about they agreed to distract Nehemiah by some really stupid things. Nehemiah chapter 6 and verse 2. Come, let us meet together among the villages and plains of Ono. But they thought to do me to do harm. So I said, measure them. Here is Nehemiah and his crew. They're out there working. And his critics said, oh, Nehemiah, let's have a meeting. Let's go back. Let's stop the work, Nehemiah. Y'all come, let's talk about this. Nehemiah says, it's not going to happen. He sent a messenger back. Just keep going. And he said, stay focused. They sought to compromise. They actually wanted to do him harm. They asked him to come speak with him. But no, Nehemiah chapter 3, I am doing a great work, so I cannot come down. Put your eye on the goal and don't take it off. Edgar, I'm going back to you, and I was there at that ball game. 23 seconds on the clock. Was 1 point behind Edgar. I'm bringing back a nightmare now. 23 seconds on the clock. Evans is in possession. Got one shot at it. They need one score. Willis is red in the face, and the whole team did. Edgar's thinking about deer hunting on the creek next week. Edgar, you're gonna kill that big buck after you get through that ball game. Is that where your mind was at? Your mind was on that 1 point in that last 23 seconds of that basketball game. No, he didn't. They lost by 1 point. Oh. Anyway, you need to know. Edgar, I'm not picking on you about that. Anyway, I'm not picking on you. The point being, stay focused. Don't let the devil draw you away to false doctrine, false teaching, and lies. He is the father of all lying. He'll convince you that it sure sounds good to do it his way. Nehemiah here has his critics. They have a conspiracy. In Nehemiah chapter 6, let's call him back. He's I'm not going. I got to keep my mind on the work. I'm doing, in Nehemiah chapter 6 and verse 3, I'm doing a good work. You boys, leave me alone. He was able to stay focused. So there's going to be problems. There's going to be distractions. There's going to be situations that have to do it. So you think about it. As you stay focused, maintain the work. Maintain the work. That's the last one of the lessons. Lesson's yours. Maintain the work. Even though you got problems, even though you've had discouragement, even though there's been setbacks, do the work. And here, I'm getting out of the line. Paul told Timothy, make full proof of thy ministry. Be thine example of believers in all things. Timothy, don't let people, maintain the work. If you start a good work, there's going to be problems, expect them. Overcome them, pray to God. Care, prayer, plans, overcoming obstacles, and maintaining the work. 5 points. And that kind of works a lot. Keep examining yourself, understand what we're doing, and keep working. I think the book of Nehemiah is a book of encouragement, because in Nehemiah chapter 6 and in Nehemiah chapter 6 and verse 15, so the wall was finished on the 25th day of Elul in 52 days. 52 days. They accomplished what Nehemiah prayed to God might happen. They were successful because God was on their side. I'm going to lead into the morning's Bible, in the morning sermon, Romans the 8th chapter. God be for us, who can be against us. I thank you for your comments in the class, and I hope Rick will be back next week. This is too much you had to put up with me. The Lord's willing, he'll be back next week. Luke 22 and verse 9, I think it is. Luke 22:9 is where his class will begin next week. Thank you for your comments in the class.